Well, good morning and welcome to our Redcliffe Dying to Know Day event 2025. My name is Kerrie Mendl and I'll be your MC this morning. This is our second year hosting this event here in this venue, and I want to say a shout out first up to City Point for having us, to Angelica, who's our sound lady. Thank you for having us, and if Cameron is around, he's the operations pastor. Thank you for allowing us to use your beautiful facility. So Dying to Know Day, why are we here? Can I have a show of hands if you were at this event last year? So quite a few. We did have about 50 register, and I've just done a quick head count. There's 30 that have come, so we might have some stragglers. 20 other people might come in late, but thank you to those that have come again if you came last year. So Dying to Know Day is a national event. It is actually the 8th of August, so tomorrow is technically the day, but we were unable to get this venue tomorrow, so we thought we'd host it a day early. But Dying to Know Day is in its 11th year, I believe, of a national awareness program about death literacy and opening up the conversations about death, dying, palliative care, funeral planning, advanced care planning. And it was started by a lady by the name of Kerrie, another Kerrie. We've got 3 Kerries here today. Her surname I've just forgotten, and she actually did it as her PhD degree. Her PhD was looking at death literacy in Australia, and she came up with this concept of a national awareness day called Dying to Know Day, and started it about 11 years ago. And so right around Australia there are events being hosted like this, Dying to Know Day events, in small cafes, in halls like this, and it's around opening up that conversation. 2 things in life are certain: death and taxes. We are all going to die, and unlike what Sam was saying, talking about it doesn't make it happen faster. Some people, when they hear you're a palliative care nurse or in the funeral business, they think it's a taboo topic, but today is about unpacking those things that are related to death and dying and the journey. And if you can prepare, all the research and evidence shows that your experience at the end of life is better if you're prepared for the end. So today we are being sponsored by Cornerstone Funerals. I'll introduce Sam in a moment, Sure Plan, and My Care Enterprises, which is the business that I run. So I am going to invite the lovely Kimberly. Here she is. Kimberly Austin is the Business Development Manager from Sure Plan, and she's going to say a few words as one of our lovely sponsors. Thank you, Kimberly.
Thanks, Kerrie Ann. My name is Kimberly Austin, so I'm with Sure Plan. Today, first I'd like to say thank you to Sam from Cornerstone for organising this event. It's a very important thing for us all to be thinking about and discussing, so it's wonderful to have this opportunity to sponsor. And a little bit about Sure Plan. We are a friendly society, so we're a member-owned mutual fund. So we provide funeral bonds, so when you might do a pre-needs plan, the money will be secured with us, and then upon passing, the payments will be made out for the funeral director or nominee. It's a good way to secure some money aside for future planning, and our company Sure Plan has been running since 1935. It originally started as a Postmaster General's organisation for their employees. So they set aside an insurance fund for their employees, so it's been running for 90 years. Our funeral bonds were introduced in 1998, and so we have been providing those since that time. We are Brisbane based, so we have an office here in Spring Hill, so we have a lovely team. You can come visit if you have any questions, or give us a call to ask any more. Have a stall here, so afterwards if you do want some more details about funeral bonds, please come have a chat to me, and grab a little show bag with all the details as well. But thank you today, and thanks again Sam for organising this. I think we'll learn a lot today. right, thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you, Kimberly. And no doubt as you came in, you would have seen our wonderful stall holders. We do invite you during the morning tea break to go and browse and chat to each of them. So in terms of format this morning, we're going to start with our expert panel. I'll give a bio of each of them and they will give a short 5-minute presentation about our particular area of expertise, and that will take about half an hour. Then we are going to break for morning tea. Thank you to the Friendly Grocer for their catering. So grab a cuppa, a sandwich or a scone or some fruit and feel free to browse the stalls. And during that time, we invite you to write a question or ask a question of our panel. So as you came in there, you would have seen the registration desk to the left. There's some paper and pens. You're very welcome to write a question down. It can be about anything. It could be addressed to a particular panellist if it's specific to an area, or if you're not sure, we can just ask the question. If there's a lot of questions on a particular topic, we might put them together in themes. That happened last year. And then we will put those questions in the second half. So I'll give you half an hour for morning tea. We don't have a bell, but I'll yell out and say, come back into the hall, and then we'll have our question and answer time. And then there'll be time at the end again if you need more time to chat with the stall holders. How does that sound? Yes? And Sam did indicate if you would like to go into the draw for a Cornerstone basket, write your name on the question. Now, I won't be reading out the names, but if you would like to go into the draw, we'll draw that at the end. So there's a little basket out there to put your questions. And in terms of facilities, if you do need bathrooms, just straight out the door and to the left. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce our first panellist. We have Andy. So Andy Coe is a palliative care nurse practitioner with over 30 years nursing experience. Andy has worked within the palliative care sector for more than 8 years. That's actually more, you've worked longer than that, for 8 years. Andy has supported hundreds of people to die in their place of choice with comfort and dignity, as well as providing support and advice to families caring for their loved ones at the end of their lives. Please put your hand together and we welcome Andy. You can either present from here or sit down, whatever you like.
Down.
You're going to sit down. Excellent. Okay, over to Andy. Thank you.
I didn't anticipate having to stand at a lectern, you say.
No, that's fine.
I have to just get on with dignity. So my name's Andy and I'm a palliative care nurse practitioner, as Kerrie said. I currently work in a statewide role, so we support, with my current employer, we support people who'd like to die, mainly people who'd like to die at home, in the regions and in very rural areas. And so we provide nursing support for them to do that with comfort and dignity. And so we look at where people would like to die and try our very best to make that happen. But palliative care as a specialty is actually, it's a fairly new specialty. When I say fairly new, like 10 to 15 years, but when you think of something like oncology, which is cancer care, or medicine or surgery, so palliative care is actually really quite new compared to all of those specialties. And what we do in palliative care, so people are sometimes really scared to get referred to palliative care because they think, oh my goodness, I'm going to die. Yes, that's true, you are going to die, but actually we're going to help you to live really, really well before you get to the point where you're dying. And then when you're dying, we're going to help you to die well as well. What that means is, so people who have got a life-limiting condition, and in adults that is mainly a cancer, but not always. It can be neurological, like motor neuron disease, or sometimes something like MS. If you've got a life-limiting condition, ask, or you will be referred to a palliative care team who will work alongside your specialists and give them some advice and some support about symptoms that you might be experiencing. And as you then approach what we call the end-of-life phase, and then those other specialists tend to take a little bit of a step back, and palliative care really comes to the forefront and helps manage symptoms. What we also do is talk to you guys about, or talk to our patients about, what do you actually want? If you have a cancer diagnosis, do you actually want to be resuscitated in a hospital? If you have a collapse, would you like to be in ICU? And if you do, that's totally fine. We'll help with that. Or would you like to have what we call comfort cares, where you've got, you might want treatment, for example, for if you've got a urine infection, but you might not want to have IV antibiotics. You might just want to have oral antibiotics. All of those things we talk to people about. We also support with Advanced Health Directives and Advanced Care Planning, so that you can have things written down. And there's amazing, wonderful people here that you'll also be able to support. And then we support with how you die and how you die well. A big part of our role is supporting families, because we know we ask a lot, and it's really difficult to care for somebody who you really love, who's dying. But we will walk alongside you, and that's what we say in palliative care, is we meet the patient where they're at and we walk alongside them with this journey. It's not about taking over and making decisions, it's about being really supportive. I'm just going to have a look at my notes and see if I've missed anything, because I tend to waffle. And Kerrie Ann, will you just let me know when I've done my 5 minutes? Very good, very good. So in my role, I've cared for people across the lifespan. So little babies who are born premature, and their families decide that they want to do a redirection of care. We never say that we withdraw care, we redirect care. And we give them support in our children's hospice or in the community or across the state. And then I've cared for people all the way up to 104, I think, is my personally oldest patient. And it's not all about medication. So it is often about medication, especially towards end of life, and what you might need and how we can support you with getting that, and so that you don't run out and so you're very comfortable. But it's also about what's actually really important to you. Who do you want to be with you? When people reflect on their lives, 100%, I would say, and I can say this with confidence, say that what they want is to spend more time with people that they love. And that might be family, birth family, blood relations, or it might be people who are really important to them. So for example, with me, I'm from England, if you can't tell, and I don't actually have any blood relations here apart from my children and my husband, but I have friends who are really important. And we recognise that friends, neighbours, the people in the school communities, the people in the shops, the pharmacists, they all could be really important to you guys. And so we work with you as a person to work out what's important to you. I think that's probably everything I've got to say, because I'm very open to questions at the end, and I don't want to go too specific, because it's not about diseases, or it's just really about what's important to you and how we can support you in doing that. But what I want to say, that I think the key takeout is, don't be afraid of the word palliative care, because it's about living really, really well and supporting you when you're coming towards the end of your life. It doesn't mean that people have given up on you, and you can still have active treatment. If you have something like a cancer, you can still be having chemotherapy, etc., and still be referred to palliative care. There's really great palliative care services in Redcliffe and in Moreton Bay and in Brisbane. So we're really lucky to live where we live, I think. Great palliative care services across the state, but yeah, it's sometimes trickier.
Thank you, Andy. If you want to just hold on to the microphone. Andy is very humble. She has worked across paediatric palliative care for probably the majority of your career, and then has now been in the adult palliative care space in a statewide service. So we're very grateful to have you join us today, Andy, and thank you for those words. I do want to acknowledge Karuna are here. We've got social worker Teresa here. Gompo, spiritual care director from Karuna, and another social worker as well. So thank you for joining us. We are very lucky across Metro North to have Karuna as a specialist palliative care provider, as well as Metro North Community Care. And so if there's any other from Queensland Health here, we recognise you as well. So our next speaker is Kerrie Mendl. Kerrie is a specialist lifestyle and care financial advisor who's dedicated to working with families to help them or a loved one transition into aged care or retirement living. Finding the right solution for an individual, couple or family member requires clear and considered advice, and Kerrie is focused on explaining all the financial options available to ensure clients and their families make the best possible choice for their circumstance. Whether you're looking to move into aged care or retirement living, Kerrie can help guide you through what is often a very complex process. She can take care of the whole process with providers and government agencies to provide you with the peace of mind that everything is being considered and managed to make the transition as smooth as possible. So welcome, Kerrie. I do also want to acknowledge today is Aged Care Employee Day. So another national day. If you work in particularly community or residential aged care, I acknowledge you today. Over to you, Kerrie. Thank you.
Thank you, Kerrie-Ann. Financial advisors talking at this event. Ooh. So I'm not going to be talking about babies. I'm not talking about your spiritual life. I'm not talking about anything medical. I'm here to help you understand the practical matters. And when I first started as a financial advisor in the 90s, now I'm making myself feel really old, I really didn't appreciate lawyers. Now, lawyers are my best friends. I'm like, oh my God, this is a whole new world. So I'm going to be talking about legal matters and how things can get really messed up if you don't pay attention to some of the practical matters. I'm going to be talking about Centrelink, Services Australia, DVA. I've got on speed dial a lot of the social workers because they get into the pointy end of things and realise, oh, we can't get what this person needs because they haven't got the right arrangements in place. So I'm the practical person on the panel. Everyone else is talking about super important stuff. I'm just here about the really annoying things that are necessary for life. I want to tell you about Paul. So Paul and I had a chat last week, and we've known each other for quite a few years. So he's not a client of mine, but we understand each other's work and what we're doing. And he said to me, it's his mum and dad. His dad has got Parkinson's, and he's had that for quite a few years. And at first it wasn't really much of a problem. And now his Parkinson's has started getting into that stage where he's needing more support, and he needs to face the fact that it's not going to get better. And he said, Dad, I think it's time that we start talking about residential aged care. And he said, nope, not talking about nursing homes, not going there. I went, okay. So he turned to his mum and he said, well, I guess it's going to be you and me that need to make these decisions. His dad said, what? No, I want to be involved in this. And he said, well, you know what, when it gets to that point, you're not going to be able to make those decisions. Because by the time he's actually progressed to the point that he actually does need residential care, it's going to be his enduring powers of attorney that get to make those decisions. Where is he going to be? Is he going to be in a big room? Is he going to be in a little room? Is it going to be the place where he can still see his mates? Are his friends going to be coming and seeing him? Does he like the food? Does he like the aspect? Can he bring up his little dog? All the things that are meaningful to him, that give his life meaning, it's going to be out of his control. He said, well, Dad, you can have control. You can make these decisions. So that's what I want you to know, that you can actually take control back. It's being aware of these are the practical matters that we need to know, and planning for that. And that's where it's like, oh, hang on, now lawyers are our best friends. The reason why I was talking about Paul and his mum is that his dad had actually said, you're the ones that I want you to make decisions. I get to see a lot of enduring powers of attorney who are now forced into making decisions, and they are saying, well, I don't actually know what they want. Or I've got enduring powers of attorney who don't agree. Or I've got enduring powers of attorney and like, we want what's best for mum and what's best for mum. I've got one son who said, I want her to go into the fancy nursing home and sell the house and get rid of that. I've got the other son who's like, no, we moved in to take care of mum. She wants to come home and see her garden. What's best for her is that she actually goes to the aged care home that's down the road. It's not the fancy one, but we want her to be able to be here and she can come home, see her garden, and that's what's important. So when you've got two people that don't agree, that makes it hard. Or the stories where there have been estranged family members and they just haven't planned for that. I've got so many stories to share with you, so please do ask questions and we can start unpacking that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kerrie. You've all been very compliant with the 5 minutes. Usually we say 5 minutes, which is kind of code for 6 or 7, but thank you for sticking to the time limit. I think you'd agree that at end of life or as you're planning, there are many different aspects of life. And whilst you might think that financial planning and enduring powers of attorney is boring, it's actually really critical. And so please don't undervalue the importance of what you do, Kerrie. So thank you. All right, our next speaker is the Rev Paul Clark. And Paul, I forgot to print your bio, so I just quickly downloaded it. So Paul Clark is the Acting Dean of Formation at Trinity College, Queensland. He trains Uniting Church ministers. He's the former lead minister at Redcliffe Uniting Church and has over 20 years' experience as a pastor, including officiating at over 300 funerals. He is an expert communicator, having been on the radio for over a decade as the At the Top guy, if you listen to 96.5, and having authored 20 books. He's married with 2 adult children. And it's a great privilege to have you here, Paul. I did ask Paul to join us last year and he was unavailable. So back by popular demand, you're here in 2025. And I've invited Paul to talk about loss and grief associated with the palliative care and death and dying process, and also about spirituality. Because as we approach the end of life, many people do ask the big existential questions about what is life, my meaning, my value, the things that connect you to your family, and is there things beyond the grave? And so I've invited Paul to address some of those topics. Thank you, Paul.
Excellent, and I might go behind the pulpit, which could be a scary... I'll take the extra time. Yeah, I've actually got a timer here. It's really great to be here, and these really are really important events. I actually, if you follow me on Facebook, I happen to, and it was by chance, I do a reel. It's one of my At the Top spots every week, and the one that came up today was actually on grief. And I thought, wow, that's amazing timing. And I was at a grief workshop with someone, and they had lost their husband, and we were just talking about funerals, and she said, a funeral is a great distraction from the agony of grief. In that, in Western culture, we're not very good at grief. We sort of just think, we'll just do it all on the funeral and that'll be it. But if you've lost someone who's special to you, you know that grief just hits you like a freight train, and it's not something that goes away after the funeral. You live with it, the agony, etc. And so these events are very healthy for our society because we do push it away. We don't want to talk about it. And I'm glad that we've got the sort of the medical side, the financial side, and so I'm that spiritual side. Because when we do face grief, when we face death, it's often the existential stuff that does create the angst in our life. And so in some ways, I want to give you all permission to say it's okay to ask those questions and to see how do I face those questions? How do I make my peace with the world that I've got? And so that might be even working out, well, who do I need in my corner to ask those questions? Some of you might say, well, I'm connected to a spiritual community, and so I know who that person is. Sometimes we're not well connected to a spiritual community, and it might be something to say, I'm not saying you have to go to church or temple or whatever every week from now on, but sometimes it is going, okay, am I going to take this seriously? You might think, well, that's not something in my life, but I know when it comes to the end, sometimes it is, okay, how am I going to make my peace in this? I know visiting people who are in the palliative care stage, I often can sense they want to ask the question. There's sort of these questions they just want to ask. Having a minister walk in or another kind of religious leader, it gives them permission to ask that question, but it also means if I go in and just visiting a friend and I'm Tom Smith, if I ask, oh, have you made your peace with God? It feels really strange. But if I come in as a minister, people actually expect it of me. Have you made your peace? And if people say, yes, I have, that's fine. I don't push them if they haven't. Sometimes it's also the peace that you need to make. There's estranged relationships. And a lot of people think, I want to get some things off my chest. I want to be able to give my apologies or whatever it is. And so thinking about those existential questions. And I'll talk a little bit more about grief because, like I said, grief is one of those just profound things. I have a mother who lives in Melbourne who I only talk to, I talked to her a little bit more recently, but, I used to maybe talk to her every month, etc. And if I looked at it really logically, if my mum died, my life wouldn't actually change very much. As in, there would be that conversation I don't have every now and then and the holidays. Yet I know, even when you live a long way away and you're not very engaged, when someone that you are related to passes away, someone you've had a connection to, it just undoes you completely. And you don't know how to cope with it. Two years ago, my mum was diagnosed with cancer. That she went into hospital and the doctor said, you might not make the end of the week. That's how bad she was. She'd missed all her symptoms. By the time she got there, she was in trouble. They treated her. She actually was given palliative, but she made this miraculous recovery, which I was preparing her funeral, as in I didn't think she'd make Christmas, and she had an amazing recovery. She's still living with cancer, and it will eventually get her. But suddenly I was confronted with the reality of my mum's not going to be around anymore and what that grief meant. Aha, there's my timer. The Uniting Church, who I work for, Uniting Care, Blue Care are part of our services. They actually run grief programs, and that's the program that I was sitting in when I was talking to someone. And Redcliffe Uniting, I'm pretty sure, runs the program. I don't work there anymore. So if you are here because someone else that you know is facing that, often you need somewhere to go and you need people to talk with. And again, we live in the denial of, I don't want to, I can deal with this, I'll be okay. But it's really good. They have, I think it's an 8-week course where you just sit with others who are grieving and you work through that. And I think that's a really good program. Look for Blue Care, grief. I want to tell you one story because I love this story to finish with, because it does show how we even change in life. I happened to read Bono's autobiography fairly recently, the prophet Bono from U2. And he talks about meeting Frank Sinatra. And you can imagine for Bono, meeting Frank Sinatra is a big deal. And he remembered hearing him sing that famous song, My Way. And we do get that song at funerals. I did it my way. When Frank first recorded that song in 1969, Bono says, he sang it full of bravado. It was kind of an up yours to the establishment and maybe even to God. You know, I'm an independent, ruggedly independent man. I'm going to do it my way. But Bono said he listened to Frank sing this song now at the age of 79, and he was amazed because Frank sang the same words, the same arrangement, but he'd completely changed how that song came across. What had been a boast at 54 became an apology at 79. Bono heard this on a recording and had to go and find out what was going on. And Bono says he saw the genius of Sinatra in that. Sinatra had come to loathe that song. It was the song that kind of made him famous, and wherever he went, people wanted him to sing, "I Did It My Way." So he actually hated singing it. And when he was 79, someone else said, "Let's do a duet of it. Let's sing it one last time." And that's when Frank sang it completely different. Bono says, where once he was a man standing before his God singing in defiance, now he was an older, wiser man singing before his God in defeat. He sang it as a confession, sort of like, okay, Lord, I did it my way. That's all I could do. I had to make life meet, but I throw myself on you now. Is there any other way to meet our God at the final curtain, says Bono, than with honesty and humility? To tell it straight, to say, this is how I've lived, God, but I throw myself on you. And I just think we all are on that sort of journey to say, okay, when it comes to the end, maybe it is about going, okay, I've lived who I am, but I need to be ready for what's next. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. We've given you liberty going over the 5 minutes. The 1 or 2 minutes that Andy and Kerrie didn't use, you got those ones. Thank you. Our final expert panellist is Sam Major, and Sam is the General Manager at Cornerstone Funerals. With over 10 years of experience in the funeral industry, Sam has truly done it all, from late night transfers to creating meaningful photo tributes. Holding a degree in business management, Sam's journey into the funeral world began at a chance meeting with a local businessman. That encounter has led him to create Cornerstone Funerals, a company built on the vision of providing genuine comfort to families, all while remaining proudly locally owned and operated. Please welcome Sam Major. Thanks, Sam.
Thank you, Kerrie Ann. How's everyone going? Good? I see we're talking a lot. It's good to get a bit of feedback. So like Kerrie Ann said, this is my 10th year in the funeral industry. Going into it, it was actually really just, I needed a job. It wasn't actually something that I was like, you know what, growing up, I'm like, I want to be a funeral director. I want to look after dead people. And it's, so I sort of fell into it where I needed a job, and my cousin was doing photo presentations for a local funeral home, and he said, it's easy, man. You just stand at the front of a chapel and point at a book. So I was like, I can do that. And so my wife was happy. I'd got myself into a job, and very quickly I realised that actually I'm very good with these families who are struggling with the emotions of everything, and quickly got trained up to be a funeral arranger. So it was less pointing at a book and more talking with the families and organising everything. So I learnt my trade there, and then that company actually sold to a big corporation, and it went sort of in a different direction to what I was used to and what I wanted to see it go. And I think the straw that broke the camel's back for me was when I'd met with a family, had spent about 2 hours with them going through all of their process, going through the photo album with them and everything, and was told by the GM that if I'm taking more than an hour, I'm wasting company time. And it was at that point I was like, okay, that's not right. So, like Kerrie Ann said, there was a chance meeting with a local businessman. I got my degree in business and also in marketing, and he had a local restaurant and needed some help. And one day he just said to me, when I told him what had happened, he said, well, would you like to run your own funeral home? And I said, well, yeah, I would. And so that chance meeting ended up with Cornerstone Funerals being established. So we sort of started in 2021 and we've been growing ever since. I was just saying to Kerrie before that already this year we've exceeded last year's families that we've looked after, which is great to see that people are choosing to go with the local company. So with 10 years of experience, I've seen it all from families who do a direct cremation, they don't want anything to do with it, it's just out of sight, out of mind, all the way through to we did the funeral for the young footballer that passed away in Barcelona. We did it in the stadium here in Redcliffe. So I've seen both ends of the spectrum, and from what I've learnt in those 10 years is that there's really no right or wrong way to do a funeral. The main thing is that you consider the one that's passed, and you consider yourself, I think, is a big one. What people don't realise is that, yes, the funeral is about the person who has passed away, but the value and the importance of it is actually in those who are celebrating the life of the person who's passed. And that seems to be missed a lot, that people will consider the plans of the person who's passed, but at the same time not actually think of themselves. And we do find that people will see a funeral as a Band-Aid, that, you know, I go, do the funeral, rip that Band-Aid off, and then I'm back to life and it's all good and happy. It can be an absolute process, and so part of what we're doing at Cornerstone is going beyond just looking after the funeral service, but it's actually the aftercare. So I've got the lovely Leah who has been working with me, is studying her grief counselling so that we can provide that after service, and we're doing aftercare packs that just give a bit of guidance to allow the people who are left behind to start that process on the grief journey. That I think it was explained that grief is like a box, and inside there's a button, and that button is really painful when it's pressed, and that there's a little ball inside that as you continue with your life moving around, the ball will eventually, every now and again, will hit that button, and you'll feel that ache of that loss. There was a lady who lost her husband in 9/11, and I was watching a documentary on it, and she said, you know, it's funny, my husband who was in 9/11, who passed away, would always leave the toilet seat up every single time, and I used to rage at him and complain every single time. And now when she goes to the bathroom, the toilet seat's down, there's that little bit of pain that she remembers that about him. Even though it was a sticking point, it was still something that reminds her, and sometimes our grief can be like that. So last year we talked about, and we've actually done it, is creating a book which is called the I Care Grief Journal. And that I Care Grief Journal is a colouring in book, super simple device that has prompts that sort of helps you on that grief journey. And so we introduced that because we obviously talk with a lot of nursing homes and palliative care staff, and the hard thing for them is that they're connecting with families and with people that they lose a lot more than a regular person would. So we have a number of connections in our life, but they have so many more that are usually at that end stage, and they experience grief and loss. So we've created this book as a very simple device that just sort of starts that conversation and starts them on that grief journey. And we're putting that in our aftercare packs for families as well. So thank you so much for coming today. We're going to be having our morning tea shortly. And like Kerrie said, there is a chance to write your questions. There's no such thing as a stupid question. Probably the only stupid question is one you don't ask. So I'd encourage you, and if you do want to put your name on the questionnaire, we won't read that out obviously, but we do have a box which has a lot of confectionery in it, because Tom's Confectionery Warehouse has donated this box of goodies. So anyone who puts a question in today will go into the raffle at the end of the event, and we'll draw that. So thank you.
Thank you, Sam. I do want to acknowledge our stall holders. So today we have Wellways. Where is our lovely Wellways? Sorry, remind me your first name. Kathy from Wellways, thank you for joining us. We have Elle from Davida, give us a wave. Thank you, the lovely Elle. We have Final Touch, and your first name? Jenny from Final Touch, thank you. Obviously Cornerstone Funerals, Kerrie Tully from Vitalife Legacy. We've got 3 Kerries today, Kerrie Tully, Kerrie Mendl and Kerrie Ann. Ladybird Wills and Estates. Amy, thank you for joining us. And we have the beautiful Rudo from Everlight Stories. Give us a wave, Rudo. So these lovely stallholders have got some information. Please take some time over morning tea to have a chat to them. Also, please do ask your questions. And just as a sponsor from MyCare Enterprises, I'm wearing 2 hats today. So some of you may know that I am the state member for Redcliffe, but I'm here today as the founder and director of MyCare Enterprises, which is a private in-home nursing service that I started in 2021 after being a palliative care registered nurse for over 30 years, working particularly in community services. I found there was a gap for that overnight palliative care. And for people who wanted to die at home, they either didn't feel confident or didn't want to be able to provide that overnight support, or they might need a nurse for longer time during the day. So we started in 2021 and we've helped over 100 people to die at home in the comfort of their own home, and some of that service has been providing 24/7 registered nursing support. And I have an amazing team, and I've got Kathy and Kathleen here. Give us a wave down the front. So now I'm busy as a state member for Redcliffe. Kathy and Kathleen manage the business for me. But we've got a team of 15 nurses, and we do provide that extended in-home palliative care, but also general nursing as well. So if you've got any questions in that space, feel free to chat to Kathy and Kathleen. So we are going to break now for morning tea. Given that we're a little over, we'll go to about 11:05 and then I'll call you back in. How does that sound? Hello. Okay, welcome back to part B of our Dying to Know Day event. I hope you enjoyed morning tea. Apologies, we didn't have paper plates. Sorry, we thought of everything else but the plates, so hopefully the serviettes served okay. All right, we have a lot of questions and I doubt that we're going to get to all of them, but I have tried to theme some of them. Thank you to those that have actually directed your question to a specific person. There are some obviously in that financial space, obviously some in the palliative care space, and some directly around the funeral planning. So we'll get underway, but I'll say up front, if your question is not asked, just in terms of time, perhaps at the conclusion, if you want to direct your question to the most appropriate person on the panel. How does that sound? Excellent. Okay, so the first few questions I thought as the cab off the rank are directed probably more to you, Kerrie. They're going to be around funeral bonds and going into nursing homes, if that's okay. So is there an asset amount that has to be deposited into a funeral bond, and can you add to it? So that's either Kerrie or a Sam, or maybe even a Kimberly Shaw Plan question. And just, it doesn't have to be a long-winded answer. Short and sharp's great.
You can put into a funeral bond any amount you like, so it's not that there's a minimum amount. The maximum amount is $15,750 if you want to get the Centrelink exemption, so don't go over that. If it grows over that, that's a different matter. What I particularly like about funeral bonds is present company excluded, but if if a funeral home went bankrupt, you can use that with any home.
No, it's true, yeah. We encourage the funeral bonds because anything can happen in life and business. So if you were to put that money aside with a company, because some funeral homes will do their own sort of finance side of things, if anything happens to that company, or even if it changes ownership, sometimes those amounts can be not null and void, but they can be part of that liquidation or that process. So that's the reason why Shaw Plan's here today, and as a sponsor, being around for about 90 odd years, we can trust that they're around for the long haul. So we recommend putting the bond with them. But yeah, there's no minimum amount per se, but there is limits with the benefits with your pension and asset testing, which, yeah, if you get the details from Shaw Plan, they can give you a lot more information on that.
Excellent, thank you. Another one for Kerrie. What fees are involved for going into residential care?
Residential care ranges a lot. If you're a government-supported person, so someone who doesn't have any assets or they've got limited assets, so say you've only got about $60,000 and your home is exempt because you've got somebody living there that qualifies for the property to be exempted, then your pension will cover your aged care fees. So if you are not a government-supported person, then the fees are going to range considerably, particularly after November when we've got a whole new set of rules. I would encourage you to take up a 20-minute complimentary chat with myself or my team, or you can actually go to Centrelink, as long as they don't cancel your appointment, which happened to one of my clients yesterday, and Centrelink can actually give you guidance on more on how much it's actually going to cost. The challenge that we've got is that if you do go to the aged care home, they can give you some guidance on how the government might assess you, but there is a government assessment, and that's going to be the big difference in how much it actually costs.
Thank you. Potentially another one for you, Kerrie. What are the legal requirements of the next of kin of someone dying or deceased?
The legal requirements of the next of kin, is this after a person has passed away?
Well, it says of someone dying / deceased. So I guess if you're the enduring power of attorney for somebody that is dying or palliative, what are the legal requirements?
Financially, and I imagine Andy's got some points that she would probably want to share on that. Financially, notify Centrelink after a person has passed away. If they were a pensioner, you don't have to wait for the death certificate. That means that they don't get overpaid pension. If there's a spouse, they're able to get the bereavement payments. When it comes to the estate side of things, joint accounts will automatically pass to the other account holder. Anything else is going to come via their will. So, and if they don't have a will, then that just opens up a whole minefield. A lot of people don't have wills, or they think they've got a will, but it's not actually valid. I'm sure you...
Yeah, and just from a health perspective, so once that person has lost capacity, then their EPOA, their enduring power of attorney, then takes over all responsibility for making decisions regarding to health. And for example, the other day I had a patient who I wanted to just change some medication on, and the two sisters were in the home, and the brother was the EPOA. So before I did that, the sister just called the brother and just made sure that that was all right. So it's usually okay. It's really tricky when you've got more than one EPOA and they can't decide. So one wants active treatment, one doesn't want active treatment, and that's why things like your Advanced Health Directive or your Statement of Choices or your ARP is helpful.
They absolutely can.
When it comes to decisions being made, next of kin unfortunately gets dropped from my financial perspective. I'd be interested to get, yes, and same with health, Andrea's saying. But it's all going to be down to the enduring powers of attorney, so God help you if you've chosen the wrong person.
And just on EPOAs as well, when you pass away, EPOA ceases as well, and it then transfers to the will. So executor of the will may be different to your EPOA. So keep that in consideration, that once you pass, it's now then your executor that makes the decisions with your estate, not your EPOA. So important to note that if you're updating your EPOA to someone, you're changing that you make it line up with your will to make it a bit easier when that time comes for that transition.
And following on from that, when a person is the enduring power of attorney for someone who needs to go into a nursing home, are they fully financially responsible for the cost of placement and drugs, etc., if the care patient has limited assets?
That's a really good question. So pretty much every aged care home will want a guarantee that the bill's going to get paid. You can ask for the guarantee to be removed in certain circumstances if you've given enough security. So that could be that you've said, look, I'm not paying a full refundable accommodation deposit. I don't want to get into the jargon, but if you're not paying the home a full lump sum, you could actually say, look, I'll put my property as security that you are going to get paid. Otherwise, we are getting a lot of enduring powers of attorney being asked to be the guarantor, but sometimes the enduring power of attorney is not the person who's going to be inheriting the money. So this is where I've had the conversation about, how about the person who's actually inheriting the money be the person who's actually being the guarantor?
Okay, thank you. This one's to Sam. What sort of funeral or farewell do you offer for someone elderly that only has family left as all their friends have passed?
Yeah, like I said, funerals vary drastically between what you want to do with the loved one. When there's limited families, I mean, I've had a service in a chapel probably about this size with about 10 people sitting in a semicircle around the coffin, all just getting up and sharing and having a drink. And that itself was a beautiful funeral service and sometimes has more value than when there's 1,000 people coming up to a service. So, like I said, there's no right or wrong way to do it. It is about honouring the person who's passed away and starting that grief process and grief journey. So there is no right or wrong. Even people who've done a direct cremation, we usually say what you're doing with the ashes, the memorialisation of that can also be a ceremony that can help with the grief process. So whether that's, and you'll see with Final Touch, the urn supplier, they've got scattering tubes, which is a lovely way to say farewell, and to do a bit of ceremony or ritual around the memorialisation of ashes is a lovely way to farewell.
Beautiful. Now this one is to the whole panel. What are your key considerations when working with culturally diverse and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander families in palliative care?
Yeah, so I think, so we do a lot of education, hey, like there's so many courses that you can do and you have to do them when you start with an organisation, but I think the most important thing is to meet the person where they're at and to work with their local community, and that can sometimes be meeting with the elders and finding out what is appropriate. Often with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, they'll nominate somebody that will be kind of your cultural go-to, just so you make sure that you do everything correctly and appropriate. And I also think, so in this particular region, we've got a lot of people from the Pacific Islands and, like from culturally diverse backgrounds, and so, but not everybody within that culture is the same, and what's important to one person is different to what's important to the other person. So it's absolutely about having conversations and being respectful and meeting the person where they're at, and actually not to go in with your own preconceived ideas. Just because I've done the workshop at Queensland Health doesn't mean that I'm an expert, and certainly as a British woman fairly new to Australia. I didn't have that when I first came over, so I had a huge, massive learning curve. But I honestly think it's about being respectful. I've done some work, in the outer islands as well, and it's really confronting going in as a white woman for them, and also a little bit for me. And so we just make sure that we take things really slowly and really respectfully and ask questions. And if I don't understand something, then I think just being really honest and saying, "No, I really don't understand what you mean, but can you explain it?" And I think that's really across the board with everybody that we work with, but specifically for those vulnerable populations.
Paul, did you want to add anything to that?
It is an interesting space, and I'm training ministers now, and probably a good third of them are from other cultures, and that's been something. Indigenous people do funerals very differently to our culture, and sometimes it's a 2-week experience or longer, and other cultures the same. And it really is about stepping back, because we kind of think, oh, everyone's the same as me, and going and having those conversations. And I know there are traditions that don't even get talked about. In Pacific Island cultures, they'll come around and give the minister $1,000 cash in the hand, and you're kind of going, what the heck is happening here? And they think you expect it and know it's coming, and meanwhile I've sent them an invoice, and they're going, hang on a sec. So they're sitting down, and sometimes it is those things that you don't even think to ask, and you do have to go through, how do you want this done? How does it work in your culture? And especially being the dominant culture, we think, well, a funeral should only go for an hour, and it should look like this. To dial that back does take a whole lot of effort. And I love what you said right up the front, that you guys go in and it is meet people where they're at and go on a journey with them.
So so I do work at the Children's Hospice, Hummingbird House, and so in a facility like that, sometimes it's really tricky because, for example, if somebody wants to have a smoking ceremony, and we've got smoke alarms, and so we just really try to be really respectful and adapt what we do. So we had a smoking ceremony for a little baby that had died, and we did the smoking ceremony outside. So not quite what you would do in a home, but we try to be as respectful as possible. With a lot of our Pacific Island cultures, and you'll know this, Sam, like when somebody dies, the body's not to be left alone, and so we facilitated that. So after death, rather than the body go to the funeral director, we kept the child, lots of children, but we kept children at Hummingbird House and facilitated family to be with them the whole time. And also maybe not just one or two family members, it could be massive families, and you just try and adapt the best that you can. And it might not be as good as you get at home, but we just try and be as respectful and adaptive as we can, or I don't know the word.
Sam, perhaps from a practical point of view, if somebody is being kept at home for a week, do you want to talk about cold plates and things like that?
Yeah, so there's a number of technologies now that can help facilitate that. There is this cold plate technology that the body can be placed on that keeps them preserved without the need for invasive chemicals. So traditionally, if you're keeping them outside of any sort of refrigeration, you would use embalming to preserve the body to stop deterioration. But now there's new technologies coming in to try and assist, because there's a lot of religious and cultural that are against actually embalming the deceased, that it's not allowed and permissible. So it's coming up with, like Andy said, creative ways in which to facilitate the wishes, but keep it in a realm that's safe and comfortable for the families. Yeah.
Thank you. Just want to know more about Advanced Care Directives and Power of Attorney, and how do we get into doing this? Maybe Advanced Care Directive to Andy, because that's a medical one, and Power of Attorney I think we have addressed, but Kerrie, if you just want to go through that one more time.
Yeah, so with your Advanced Health Directive, usually you would, so this is to the best of my knowledge, okay? So usually what our families do is you can go on the Advanced Care Planning website, which is Queensland Health website. It gives you step-by-step information. There's also information about Statement of Choices. So a Statement of Choices is a document where you basically write who's important to you, what you would like, really practical things like would you like music when you're dying, who would you like in the house, all of those things. You also have a little bit of information on there where you can talk about not returning to hospital for CPR, etc., etc. That is not a legally binding document, so it's signed off by your GP, or a nurse practitioner can do it, like myself, and it's just to talk about your wishes. But the Advanced Healthcare Directive is a legally binding document, and so usually you need somebody to sign that off. Now it can be, I'm just looking at the room and you can nod your head, I think it can be a lawyer, but it can definitely be your GP, and they can do it. And I don't know the Justice of the Peace can do it, I'm actually not very sure, but all of that information is on that website. Then that gets lodged with the Advanced Care Planning people. and then that is on the system. So if you present to a hospital, for example, we pull it up on what's called the viewer, and we can see that information so that people are not doing things that you actually had not wanted them to do in that critical time. It's really, really helpful. I mean, I don't have an Advanced Healthcare Directive, and I really, really, really should. Most people who talk about death all the time might not have some of those things, but you really should, and it's a really helpful document when you get to the pointy end of maybe not being able to make the decisions yourself. Then your family are not left with having to make those really tricky decisions and second guessing themselves.
Yes, you can.
Very good.
Thank you. Normally, last year we did have Michelle Linton. We won't be taking questions from the floor, sorry. Michelle Linton was here from Queensland Health. She's the Advanced Care Planning Coordinator for Redcliffe Hospital and this region. We did invite her to join us today, but she's actually on leave. So apologies that we didn't have that particular information here today, but we'll aim to have her again next year. And quickly, Kerrie, just on appointing an enduring power of attorney, how do you do that?
How you appoint an enduring power of attorney, I would suggest that you actually talk to the person and make sure that they know that they're acting. Otherwise, if you're an accountant or you're a lawyer, suddenly finds that they're making decisions for you. I've seen plenty of them go, oh my goodness, they never asked me to do that. And suddenly they decline, and we're in a QCAT situation where we're going to be going down that path. But power of attorney, you'll find, you can Google it, you'll get the government version of that form. It's quite easy to be able to follow the steps that are involved in there. It is important to get it signed off properly, so I would encourage you at a minimum to go to a JP to get it properly authorised so that you do things in the right way. I've seen one decline just recently because the people who are acting signed before the person who was granting it had signed, and the aged care home actually rejected it, even though the bank and the government had already accepted it.
Okay, this one I think is for Andy again. Sorry, you're the hot one today. Who is the best point of contact for VAD, which is Voluntary Assisted Dying? So answer that one. That's
Okay, I will.
Sorry, there's three parts to this one. Yep.
So it's a really fairly easy process. So if you can go on Google, it's a really good option. So you just Google QVAD, which is the Queensland Voluntary Assisted Dying statewide service. Heaps of information on there, but the best thing is they've got a free phone 1-800 number, and you can ring for further information. They will then put you in touch with the most appropriate person, whether it's a local representative from Metro North, for example, or it depends where you live in the country, but they'll be able to be your absolute source of information. So that's QVAD. If you just put in Voluntary Assisted Dying Queensland, it will come up. And
is an Advanced Health Directive enough to choose QVAD or VAD?
It makes no difference what you've got in your Advanced Healthcare Directives. So you have to have capacity. So Advanced Healthcare Directive only comes in place when you've lost capacity, so you can't make decisions for yourself. To access voluntary assisted dying, you actually need to have capacity, so you need to be assessed by 2 independent doctors to say that you have capacity and you're making this decision of your own free will, and then you can access VAD. So it doesn't matter what you've got in your Advanced Healthcare Directive.
And last one on this topic, is quality of life a reason for VAD?
So there's strict criteria, there's really strict criteria for accessing VAD, as you can imagine. And you need to have a life-limiting condition. You need to have a prognosis, so you need to be expected to die within 12 months, I think it is in Queensland, 6 to 12 months. And you need to be assessed that you're going to die from that illness. So there are certain things that are absolutely not included, something like dementia, mental health issues, young people below the age of 18 are unable to access VAD. So you have to prove, you don't have to prove it, but that you have to be seen to be having a fairly extensive suffering. But that's really defined by yourself, so it can be. So for example, some people will choose to have VAD once they're unable to provide personal cares for themselves, so once their family has to change a pad, for example, and they can't go to the toilet for themselves, that's when somebody with a life-limiting condition would choose to access VAD. For somebody else, it might be if they have pain that is unmanageable, then that's when they would choose to access VAD. For somebody else, it could be something like, so there's some dreadful head and neck cancers, and so it could be, if you've got an awful cancer that might be on your face or in your throat or something like that, then that's when they might access. But you have to have an expectation that you're going to die within 12 months.
Okay, next one. What are the advantages, disadvantages of having your will with a solicitor or family?
The advantage of having it with your solicitor is that they've got the original, they're able to lodge that with the Supreme Court, it's safe, you don't have someone who's potentially going to be pulling it apart and photocopying it, and then you get questions on, oh, how do we know you didn't actually substitute a page here, because it's not in that original format with the staple. We can see that you've actually removed the staple. You don't want to be in that position. I love having it with solicitors. The disadvantage of having it with a solicitor is what happens if they retire. It's actually pretty easy. You go to the Queensland Law Society and then their packets have gone to whoever is holding them, so you can track that down. If it's with family, family could be it's open to misuse, so they could actually have, oh, I'm getting an inheritance, so I'm making decisions based on what's in here. They could damage the document. It could be lost because, another person's gone, oh, I don't like this, so I'm just going to get rid of it. So I'm a big fan of keeping the will with the lawyer.
Thank you. Maybe one for you, Paul.
I thought I was getting out of it.
No, I'm going to ask
really.
a curly one. This is from me. This is about existential suffering. Do you think as people approach the end of life that if they haven't made peace that there can be an impact on physical symptoms? Have you seen that in your experience?
Yes, indeed. And I mean, sometimes a bit that the VAD and quality of life, sometimes it is all around the existential suffering, which then is hard to show medically because it's an existential thing. I had a World War II veteran who he had flown bombers over Germany and dropped bombs on Germany, and for him coming to the end of life, he never saw his victims, but he dreamt about the people that he killed. Which is just heartbreaking. And he'd been in church all his life, and in church we talk about forgiveness all the time, and yet it was still, he was having trouble forgiving himself. And how am I going to face my Maker knowing that I killed children and wives who had nothing to do with the war? And so that was a big existential crisis for him, and we worked with him as best we could. I had another lady just recently who would, and I mean, this is funny in that it's not existential, but she had been writing a book, sort of like a memoir, and wanted it published. She had cancer, she knew she was going to die, but she got sicker quicker, and suddenly she ran out of time. And that was, for her, that was a big existential, I wanted to get this done, but now I can't. And I happened, she was in my church and I happened to be her pastor, so I was visiting her, and when the family said, this is really causing distress, because I've written and published books, I was actually able to say, I can finish that off for you, which we did. She had written it all, it needed to be edited, and et cetera, and it was about 2 years later we finally launched that book, and it was actually we'd done the funeral 2 years later. So kind of the same crowd came back. We launched the book and gave out free copies to everyone, and it was actually just a real joyous time of kind of going, because it had taken longer than I'd hoped, because the family, trying to negotiate with the family. But in some ways, I thought the 2 years was kind of a nice, if we'd done it 6 weeks later, it would have been too early, but 2 years later, it was something very profound. So, and it is a strange thing in terms of, you would think that people who come to church would have made peace with death, but it's just, I actually think a lot of people join religion to kind of put death aside. It's been a strange experience of mine that people sort of think, I'm going to come to church so I don't have to think of death, as in, and then when they come to there, it's kind of they've never actually thought about it. There's been studies done on this, that we tend to think death is going to happen to someone else. It's a bit like everything else. That's going to happen to someone else and somehow I'm going to get out of it. But then it becomes real. And finally having the courage to face those questions that we've put off is, I train ministers to do funerals, and the first thing I tell them is, you have to make your own peace with death because you're going to keep coming across it. And sometimes we've made this much peace with death, and then something will happen that just completely pulls the rug out from under us again, because, you know, we kind of think, oh, well, only old people die. But oh no, this was a young person, and only these kind of people die. But no, and suddenly you're starting to bury people your age and younger than you. So there is a whole lot of, I need more than 5 minutes to unpack that. But and in some ways, it's your own individual journey as well. It's not, here I've got the magic sauce that will work for you.
So following, oh, sorry, Andy, please, yes.
Just from a symptom management point of view, so sometimes we can be caring for somebody who's dying and they just have unbearable pain sometimes. And, you know, you think, you know, I've given them all the really good drugs and we've done all of the other things that we can do, and you're really racking your brains as to why is this not working, and it is often because there's unresolved things. It can often be, and I've seen it so many times, it can often be they've maybe fallen out with the brother or the child, and they're waiting to resolve that. I've seen people who, you guys will have all heard this, I'm sure, as well. So I've seen people who have said, I want to wait, I don't want to die until my grandchild is born. And you think, oh my gosh, that's like 4 weeks away. And they don't die until the grandchild is born. You see people who very frequently, you guys at Karuna will know this, you see people very frequently who talk to people who have died previously, so the ancestors or the loved ones. There is also some research done by the universities, and it's an Australian research that talks about people who have PTSD for whatever reason, like, you know, trauma from the past, who actually re-experience PTSD at death at the very pointy end. And we had a lady up north recently who raged against her death and had really difficult symptoms to manage, but I just want to say that we managed them really well, and she died really, really peacefully. But it was more about giving medication. It wasn't only about giving the medication. There was lots and lots of work that we had to do. So the existential stuff can have a massive impact, I think, on your physical symptoms. And I think sometimes as health professionals we can forget that, and it's all just about why have you got that sore leg or that sore belly, but actually there's a lot more to it than that. Give you that back.
Thank you.
Can I quote Bono again?
Oh, go for it.
We talk about dignity in dying, and I totally get that. Bono, in something else I read, was saying that when we come into life, when we're born, there's not much dignity. If you've been at a birth, there's blood, there's gooey stuff where, you know, there's not much dignity, and yet we survive that. And he actually says in death, we kind of hold on to this idea of dignity, but maybe the better attitude is like birth. It's kind of like that humility. This is something that's happening to us, and let's embrace it, rather than, well, I want to be in control of this, and somehow I want to maintain my dignity. I think if we're battling it, then that's going to create issues. So, yeah, I don't remember my birth, so that's probably good, but I was there for my children's birth, and I felt like I was on a freight train I'm just holding on here, and I guess I feel that that's probably how the other end is going to be as well, and in some ways it's okay. I'm just going to hold on and trust.
Something that's held me in my clinical practice is understanding that as humans we are physical beings, we're spiritual beings, we're social beings and psychological beings, that holistic aspect. And Dame Cecily Saunders, who's the mother of modern day palliative care, she was a nurse who trained to become a palliative care physician. She says that often as doctors and nurses we just look at the physical aspect of dying, but unless we embrace the totality of who we are as people, that we don't address those existential. And I'm sure for the clinicians in the room, we've seen people die, you know, some difficult deaths because they haven't had their social, psychological, spiritual aspects addressed. And yet, you know, from a clinical perspective, they think they're getting excellent symptom management. So just remembering that really 3/4 of who we are is psychosocial, spiritual, social, that the physical part is just one aspect. Okay, back to wills. I've written a will in the UK. I now live in Australia. Do I need to rewrite my will here to be legal?
It is a good question, and I apologise that I was not able to answer it in the break. A lawyer is going to be the best person, so I'm not even going to try and pretend to be a lawyer. We have had people who are recommended get a will for your assets wherever they are. So if your assets are in the UK, it's great to have a UK will. If your assets are in Australia, I would suggest that you also need an Australian will. Specifically, a Queensland will if your assets are in Queensland.
Excellent. Okay, back to Andy. If someone would like to die at home, do they need a doctor's referral or do they just ring palliative care directly?
That is a really tricky, that's a really broad question. So I'll just try to think of the relevant place. So usually what would happen if you wanted a referral to palliative care, you need somebody to refer you. That can be your GP. It can be somebody like myself as a nurse practitioner. It can be your specialist. So if you've got an oncologist or a renal specialist, then they'll refer you to palliative care. So you can't self-refer. Can you self-refer at Karuna? You can self-refer at Karuna, which is our community palliative care not-for-profit that is works in Moreton Bay. I'm not speaking for you. But usually if you want a hospital-based specialist palliative care service, then you'll need a referral from somebody, and it's usually your GP or your specialist. As a nurse practitioner in the regions that I work in, then I can refer to palliative care. I can also do referrals to hospice, but it's having a conversation with the right person, and I guess you've got to work out who the right person is. If in doubt, you need to speak to your GP. That's all right, isn't it?
GP is a good gateway. Yep.
It's just really varied from where you live and which specialist service you take.
But here in Metro North,
yes,
it's generally through your GP or if you're already connected to a palliative care service.
Correct. Or your specialist, like your oncologist, because they refer to palliative care. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. How can aged care homes better support families with a loved one that has commenced at end of life? Sorry, Andy.
So there is a programme that I'm pretty confident works in Metro North. It's called SPACE, so it's Specialist Access to Palliative Care, and they have it has recently been a nurse practitioner, it could have changed, and they have a doctor that actually will do what's called needs assessments in residential aged care. So they will review, they'll speak to the staff, they have to be invited in, of course. They'll speak to the staff and they will do a needs assessment round for people who they think might be requiring palliative care. Very broad, but they'll have a little look and they'll do things like family conferences, they'll support with symptom management, etc. There is also I think it's federally funded program which is called PACOP, which is specifically about palliative care in aged care. And so what we use in palliative care, I'll just take it one step back, what we use in palliative care when we're looking at symptoms is we use a particular set of guidelines when we're looking at symptoms, and all of us are doing the same thing. So we're looking at how somebody's living, how they're managing, what the symptoms are, and then we kind of score it on a PACOP tool, it's called. And then they have done this very same thing for aged care, but it has extra things like looking at frailty, looking at families and making recommendations about that. So that's a government funded programme. They send people specifically into aged care, usually nurses, but send particularly in aged care, and work with the staff to look at and being consistent with how they manage people at end of life. But it really, really is residential aged care dependent, and they have to really buy into these programs, and not all of them do as well, even though you think when you go into aged care, you're really not coming out of that alive often. Sometimes people do are in aged care and then come home to die, but that's not super common. So you really just have to have a conversation with your particular residential aged care, but there are programs available out there. It's just whether they'll take them on or not. It's really tricky to...
And a very practical thing is to ask for a family meeting. So I've worked in community and residential aged care, and I think if your loved one is approaching end of life, that you get together with the nursing home staff and actually sit down and have a family meeting and talk about what you want and what the loved one wants. Okay, this one's to the panel. This is a great question. At Karuna, we recognise the importance of death literacy. How do you feel we can better promote this? Maybe Paul and Sam, we haven't heard from you.
I haven't talked in a little while,
let's
I'll
go.
jump in. So one of the things that we're doing, again, it's still very broad, but we set up a website called our End of Life Learning Hub, and we're coordinating with a lot of nursing homes and a lot of other companies to try and facilitate essentially this event in a digital space so that we can sort of reach out and give people the advice and give them the chance to search, because everyone learns in different ways and absorbs information in different ways. So we have events like this where you physically come and you can physically talk to us and ask us questions. We have the website where we put it's a big information dump there. You can go through and have a look at different aspects. We also have our Leah's running our Honouring Life division, doing a podcast and having one-on-one information sessions in these podcasts which answer some of those burning questions. So death literacy, like we've said at the start, it's very hard, it's very taboo, and people think talking about it you're going to catch something. But like I said, I've been around doing 10 years of funerals and I haven't gone, so it's a pretty good sign that I talk about it every day and I'm still here. So don't be afraid to ask those questions, and really it comes down to doing exactly what you're doing, having the courage to seek out the information, I think is a big one.
Paul, thoughts on death literacy?
Yeah, I mean, I think events like this, what you're talking about, I know my own denomination, I was talking to someone yesterday, they were trying to promote workshops for making wills, and they were sort of working the phones to get people there, and they had people hang up on them and sort of rail at them to sort of, you're trying to steal my money and things like that. And they were quite shocked because they said, we're actually out here trying to help people. It is a challenge because we live in a society. You talked about having, the body at home. There's all different things that you see what other cultures do, whereas we tend to ship it all up, put it in a box and hide it. My mum remembers that funerals when she was a child happened out of your home, as in person would pass away, the body would be at the home, people would come and visit, and this is white European, and the funeral actually happened out of the home. And I'm going, wow, I didn't know that. It didn't always happen in churches, it didn't always happen in funeral parlours. So death was a bit more normal, and I don't know how we get back to that except to have these kind of events. And also, the person I talked to yesterday had never heard of a death cafe, that's another name for them? And she said, oh, death cafe. And I'm going, no, it's an intentional movement. I suppose in some organisations, with our seniors group at the church, we would try and get different speakers in to come and talk about aspects of end-of-life preparation, which was good that we got that community listening. So, how do we make connection with retirement communities where we can have these conversations? But it's not just retirement communities. But it is a big challenge, How do we make people... You need to face those existential dreads, yeah.
And I think as a society, we do have organisations like Karuna, obviously Palliative Care Queensland. They do host events, but how do we get the general public accessing those? Because often it's only when you've got somebody dying that you want to or are interested.
And we are trying.
Yeah, I know you are. I mean, Cornerstone do fantastic programs. It's how do we advertise that?
Like I'm on radio and on Reels these days, which is not quite TikTok, and that I do talk about grief and death and dying on that. I talk about domestic violence. There's a bunch of issues that I talk about that aren't always talked about, and that's one of the ways that I'm trying to help people consider these things and try and do it in a way that, oh, okay, I hadn't thought of that. So, yeah, I happen to have that avenue, but...
Did anybody else want to talk about death literacy? Andy?
Just very quickly, so I've seen a real big change with the advent of social media, I suppose, and so I'm not on TikTok, and I'm old, so I am on Facebook. Apparently nobody below the age of 50 is on Facebook, my children tell me, anyway. But I've seen a lot of younger people on Instagram, because that's a bit cooler, talk about death and share their grief story. So I think that's a really powerful thing, and maybe that generation will be better at it than this generation, my generation. But the advent of that and people sharing the journeys and sharing about what it's like when somebody dies and then your journey after that and how grief is, and like quite young people, like in the 20s and early 30s. So,
and that's why days like today have been on the calendar to try and create a natural opportunity to talk about it. Okay, shifting gears a little, what services are available for those working in this industry that can help with mental health support?
Yeah, so it's a big one. It's something we talked about last year at the Dying to Know Day event, and what brought around the book that we've got on our table, which we're sort of shifted a little bit to going, well, we want to make sure everything we're doing is caring not only for the deceased, but for the whole family and those connected to the person. And so we came up with a grief journal that has simple colouring in pages and then easy prompts on the side just to start considering, because again, like we're all different. Some people benefit greatly from having someone close to them. They can just talk about the situation and discuss it with them. Others, they internalise it a lot, and so having a grief journal, a colouring in book to sort of guide them on that journey is a good stepping stone for them. They may not be comfortable talking about their feelings openly. So for people who are in a caring environment, we're doing a lot of training with nursing homes and talking about not just about looking after residents, because a lot of them do that exceptionally well, but actually looking after the staff as well. There's very high turnover rates and burnout with people who care, and we're attributing a lot of that to the fact that they're connecting with these people over many years, and every day they're losing someone. Just about every week they're losing someone that they've spent years with. So I know there is some organisations out there that can assist with people. There's a lot of grief counselling. Grief Australia is one of the big ones that you can access. But again, it's about, I think, a lot of the big organisations taking a bit of responsibility for that, and a lot of them are where they have internal programs, or they allow us to come in even to do training and things like that. So it is sort of shifting, but I think it requires a lot more people to stand up and say this is a need, and it's a great need.
This one's an important question, and certainly as a state member, I actually get a lot of these inquiries through my office. So can someone explain if a patient's in a Queensland health facility and deemed as a nursing home type patient and they've been in hospital over 30 days, what are the options because they've experienced bullying by social workers to get them out? So I'll speak to that just from a practical point of view. So Queensland health facilities have what we call a 28-day acute bed day cycle. So they do try to get patients out within that 28 days. And unfortunately, because we are bed blocked often in our hospitals, if you do have somebody that's awaiting nursing home placement or needs extended care, there isn't care options at home. We do have extended care units, but there's limited beds for those. We have Brighton here. We've got the Zilmere Transitional Care. Redcliffe Hospital, if we just speak locally, does have an extended care unit, but there is a time limit. And so it's unfortunate if you felt bullied by a social worker, that's probably because they've got pressure on them to get people out of hospital. And clinicians do talk, you know, we've got to get these people out. And having worked with the Executive Director at Redcliffe Hospital, we are looking at another option, a modular ward, where there are, at any given time, 30 people at Redcliffe Hospital awaiting nursing home placement. But it's kind of that betwixt and between. They can't really stay in an acute facility because they're not acutely unwell, but if there's nowhere else for them to go, there is a challenge and pressure on the system. So there's no easy answer to that. Obviously, awaiting home care packages, getting care in home, you need a carer at home. If you don't have a carer, you live on your own. There really is a shortage for that extended age care support until you can find placement. Did you want to add anything to that?
Oh, no, I was going to talk about the last question. I've got a training manual for doing funerals, and like I talk about, you need to do your own existential, but then you need to put a self-care regimen in place. In my industry, where as ministers we need to have a professional supervisor, I don't know, you know, it's probably not mandatory for you guys. So that's meeting with a professional who can talk these things through. And I mean, we have a whole bunch of practical stuff in there, like when you're working in the death space a lot, it's kind of like you need to find the balance at the other end. So we say, you know, get involved in a kindy or a play group and spend time with young children and get the other side of life so that it's not that burnout. So my job has that balance, whereas I know your job doesn't necessarily have that balance. And some personalities are made for those spaces, and others it is something you need to come and go. But yeah, building who are your friend networks, what's your exercise, what's your... I can send you my 2 or 3 page thing that I give to my people about what's your self-care routine in this space. Some of it's you manage, but some of it's also that it's outside you.
So that's a perfect place to end. There were 2 questions from you guys about that. So one was addressed to you, Andy. How do you look after yourself with such a challenging role? But then one to all of you, how do you practice self-care? So maybe if we finish on that, just 60 seconds each. What do you each do, given that you both, all of you, work in this space?
Yeah, so I'm a pretty resilient person. It doesn't mean that I'm not affected by the work that I do, because I absolutely am. And sometimes it can be different triggers. So often if it's a child that is a similar age to my children, so now that I'm 50, if it's a person that is this similar age to me, or my husband, then that can be really difficult. But I'm very mindful, and so I practice, this sounds really airy-fairy, but I practice gratefulness every single day, and I deliberately force myself to do that. And it can be, gosh, that's a really pretty bird, or look at that sun, or I love walking my dogs, those type of things. I do exercise. I'm a member of the Redcliffe Red Dragons. We just Dragon Boat Club, paddle out of Newport, and I do that deliberately so that I'm not constantly thinking about what I do. I went on the Spiritual Care of the Dying course that is run by Karuna, and it was very full on, and you look at your own death and you think about your own death, and I felt I could actually do that. When I was asked to think about the death of a loved one and my children, it's not somewhere that I could go. But I think it's just recognising your own limits, knowing when to ask for help, and having supportive people around you. And my poor husband puts up with an awful lot from me, but I'm very grateful to have him. My kids are aware of what death and dying is, and they have been from being very young, and I do shield them from it a little bit. But we have those conversations in the house, and I think it's really about asking for help if you need help, being mindful in your practice, and if you don't feel like going to do Pilates, I love Pilates, or you don't feel like going to do a paddle, to actually really, really making the effort to do that, and also to get good sleep and to rest. That's a lot. Whew, for 60 seconds.
My self-care routine is I go for a walk every morning. I've got my community. I know my barista. I know all the dogs in the area. I play with flowers once a month and create things. So that's, it's leaning into some of the creativity, because my work is very head-based, and I have people who are very... I get to see what's going on for them. They're opening up to me. So it's trying not to carry their load and balancing it that way.
Yeah, for me, a lot of people don't realise this about funeral homes, but majority of the staff are on call because people pass in the middle of the night at 1 or 2 in the morning. Someone's got to go and look after them, and that's generally us. So for the last 10 years, I've had it where I could be called at any moment to go and pick someone up. So for me, very important in the last couple of years especially, has been about really honouring my time and actually taking time for myself. So whether that's going on trips to Fraser Island with the family and friends, or just spending time with my family, I think that's really important to live. And a lot of people think that if you're around funerals, death and dying, you'll be a very sad, depressed kind of person. But one of the beautiful things about funerals is you get to hear all these stories that you would never, ever get to hear otherwise. And some of the stuff that gets shared is really amazing. These life stories that you never would get to hear, and given my love language is acts of service, so me being able to look after a family actually fills my tank rather than depletes me. So for me, a lot of my self-care is just making sure that I'm honouring the families that I'm looking after.
And I think the thing I'll add goes back, I think, to something you said in terms of, if you think you're invincible, that's when you're in trouble. You have to be okay with saying, I'm vincible. It's not a word we use. But it's vulnerability is actually your strength, because that's when you do say, I need to talk about this. So being able to self-monitor, and that can take a little bit of time to work out that when things start drying up, like if I'm getting angry, if I've got short temper, my creativity dries up. They're the initial signs that, I need to see my supervisor. I need to go and watch a movie, go for a walk. What are my things? So whenever we think I don't need anyone else, I think that's when we're in trouble.
That's excellent. Thank you. Well, what do you think? We've covered most of the questions. Let's give a big round of applause to our experts.